By the time Mara Quinn saw the farmhouse again, she'd already learned that you can lose a home more than once. The first time was when her mother slammed the car door and drove them off this road, swearing they'd never look back at that rotting box from the 1800s. The second was months ago, when Mara and her 10-year-old daughter were handed a folded notice and a black trash bag for their things because the shelter needed beds for newer emergencies. Everything after that had been parking lots, bus stations, and quiet corners that didn't ask questions. The letter had come to a church mailbox she only half trusted, addressed in neat legal print to a woman who barely felt like herself anymore. Mara Quinn, CEO Community Outreach. Inside, there was the stiff voice of a lawyer she'd never met and a name she hadn't heard spoken kindly in years. Your grandmother, Eleanor Quinn, had passed. There was mention of an estate, a property reference number, coordinates, signatures. At the bottom, a line that felt like a stone dropped in still water. You are the sole heir to the Quinn farm, established 1883. She had laughed when she read it, the sound sharp and too loud for the church basement. What? Her daughter Nora asked, eyes wide above the worn-out coloring book someone had donated. Bad? It might be the opposite, Mara said, which was somehow scarier. She showed Nora the letter. The girl traced the words, sole heir, with a bitten-down fingernail. Heir means house, right? She said. Not like hair. Sometimes it does, Mara answered. Sometimes it means headaches. But it also meant land, roof, walls, a place that might remember them, even if they'd tried to forget it. 3 weeks later, after a string of bus rides stitched together with vouchers, odd jobs, and a small envelope of cash from a social worker who'd quietly broken a rule. They stood at the edge of a gravel road watching their past rise out of the fields. The farmhouse sat at the top of the slight hill, its bones older than any of them. 2 stories of weathered white clapboard, a deep front porch leaning like a tired shoulder, 4 windows across the front that had once watched everything. 1883 was carved faintly into the cornerstone by the steps, the numbers blurred by time and moss. The paint peeled in strips. Half the shutters hung drunkenly, the other half lay in the weeds. But the chimney still stood, and the roof, patched with cheap shingles, held more sky than it let through. Nora took it all in, her small hand tight around the strap of her backpack. "This is it?" she whispered. "This is where you lived?" "Some of it," Mara said. "Summers mostly, before my mom decided it was poison." The air smelled like cut hay ghosts and damp earth. Somewhere far off, a tractor grumbled. But up here, sound felt thin, like it was afraid to disturb the house. There was a black mailbox at the road with Quinn faintly visible under flaking paint. Mara ran her thumb over the name, then turned toward the porch. The key from the lawyer's packet was heavier than it looked. It stuck in the front door lock, protesting years of disuse, then gave way all at once. The door opened inward with a sigh of old hinges remembering their job. Dust, cold air, and something else spilled out, a trace of wood smoke and dried herbs, the way the house had always smelled after a long winter. "It smells like stories," Nora said, wrinkling her nose. Inside, the front room spread wide and dim, floorboards scarred and dull, walls lined with faded wallpaper patterned in tiny flowers. A staircase rose along the right wall, its banister worn smooth by generations of hands. The front parlor still held the old sofa and rocker Mara remembered. ghost outlines on the floor where a rug used to be. A cracked mirror over the fireplace reflected them in dusty fragments. A tired woman in a too thin coat, a girl in a hoodie 2 sizes too big, and behind them, a house trying to decide if it recognized them. She kept it all, Mara murmured, or couldn't get rid of it. The kitchen lay through a wide doorway, bigger than she remembered, with tall windows looking over the fields. The wood stove squatted in the corner like a stubborn animal. Jars lined the open shelves, some filled with cloudy liquid, some empty, all wearing the dull halo of time. The sink was the same deep enamel basin, chipped at one corner in the shape of Maine. On the wall hung a frame with no picture, just a square of discoloration where something had been. There were cobwebs in most of the upper corners, dust everywhere, but it felt like a place waiting, not dead. Nora ran her fingers along the back of a kitchen chair, leaving a clean line. "Is there electricity?" she asked. "We'll find out," Mara said. She checked the switch by the doorway more out of ritual than expectation. Nothing. But when she found the old fuse box in the pantry and flipped each metal switch firmly, the same kitchen light clicked on with a faint hum, turning dust into bright, floating flecks. Nora actually gasped. "We have light," she said. "We have a ceiling and light." Mara gripped the counter for a second. For months, light had been things you asked other people for. A bathroom, a lobby, someone else's outlet. Here, it was theirs in a way that made her throat tight. "We'll need to get the power company to turn it properly back on," she said, more to steady herself than to inform. "But it's wired. That's something." Upstairs, the bedrooms wore the 1800s on their backs in sloped ceilings and wide plank floors. The small room at the front had been hers once, in the summers before everything fractured. The narrow iron bed frame still stood under the window where she used to listen to crickets and rain fight over the roof. The faded patchwork quilt folded at the foot smelled like cedar and dust. She sat down on the mattress and closed her eyes. For a heartbeat, she was 12 again, listening to her grandmother's voice downstairs. That soft Appalachian lilt, telling stories about people who'd worked this land before there were cars, before there were notices on doors. Nora plopped down beside her, springs squeaking. "Can I have this room?" she asked. "If you're okay with the ghosts of all my terrible teenage decisions," Mara said. "Deal." They spent the rest of the afternoon making the place barely habitable, opening windows, beating dust out of pillows on the porch rail, finding an old broom and pushing years into piles. Mara discovered the water pump in the basement still groaned to life when coaxed, spitting rusty water into the sink before it ran mostly clear. The well, at least, hadn't given up. There was a propane tank out back with a faded inspection sticker, lines leading to the stove, and an old heater. She tested it with humble prayers and cracked knuckles, managing to coax a blue flame from one burner. "We're not freezing to death tonight," she called. "So already this place is in the top 5 places we've ever lived." As dusk settled, the farmhouse took on a different mood. Long shadows stretched across the floor, and the corners of rooms thickened. Every creak sounded like a question. They ate canned soup, heated on the stove, sitting at the scarred kitchen table without plates, sharing bread straight from the bag. The air grew colder but less sharp as the fire in the wood stove took. "Did Grandma live here? Always?" Nora asked between bites. "Pretty much," Mara said. "She tried leaving once, before I was born. Lasted 3 months in town. Then came hauling herself back up here with a borrowed truck and more opinions than groceries. Why did your mom hate it? She thought this place kept her stuck, Mara said. She wanted noise and neon and grocery stores you could get to without mud on your shoes. She hesitated. She didn't want to spend her life fixing old things she hadn't broken. But Grandma stayed. Grandma believed old things were worth fixing, Mara said, even when no one thanked her for it. After Nora finally fell asleep under the quilt, breathing deep and even, Mara wandered the house by lamplight. She found herself in the front room, standing before the empty picture frame on the kitchen wall. The square of unfaded wallpaper inside it nagged at her. Why take the picture and leave the outline? She ran her fingers along the frame's edge. It didn't pull away, but something about it felt wrong. She stepped back and looked around. The farmhouse was old, yes, but honest. Wood, nail, plaster. This frame, though, sat exactly between 2 studs in a way that made it more structure than decoration. On impulse, she pressed at one edge. The right side moved a hair's breadth and clicked. The sound was tiny, but in the sleep-thick house, it might as well have been thunder. The frame swung forward on some hidden hinge, revealing a shallow recess in the wall. Inside lay a metal tin the size of a book, and beneath it, a bundle of folded papers tied with string. For a second, Mara just stared, thumb still resting on the edge of the frame. Ava in the storage unit, Nora at the cabin. Her mind put names to moments. Secrets didn't die with people like Eleanor. They just waited behind something that looked ordinary. Her first instinct was suspicion, old survival habits, telling her that boxes never brought anything but complications. Her second was curiosity, the kind that had gotten her into trouble as a kid and occasionally out of it as an adult. She eased the tin out and felt its weight. Not heavy enough for gold, too heavy to be empty. Her fingers shook slightly as she cracked it open. Inside lay photographs, black and white with scalloped edges, faces half faded, but eyes still sharp. Men in suspenders beside wagons, women in long skirts on the farmhouse porch when it was new. At the bottom, one photo sharper, newer. Eleanor in her 30s, standing with a man Mara didn't recognize in front of the same house. He wore a suit and a hat, too nice for the dirt road. She held a rolled document in one hand, mouth set in a line that wasn't quite a smile. On the back, in her grandmother's writing, the day they tried to buy us out. The bundle of papers beneath the tin was thicker. She carried them to the table, the floorboards complaining softly under her steps. The string gave way easily. Deeds, survey maps, handwritten notes, a brittle letter with a mining company logo dated 1952, offering fair compensation for land and subsurface access rights. Another letter, unsigned, in Eleanor's fierce script. Not enough. Not for what you want. Not for what this place has already given. Attached to it, a printed response from the company, tight and condescending, withdrawing their generous proposal, and warning that economic progress would proceed with or without the cooperation of individual landowners. What were you fighting? Mara whispered to the empty room. And did you win? One folded document at the bottom was newer, its edges less browned. A simple, notarized sheet, a revised deed transferring ownership of the farmhouse and surrounding land wholly to Eleanor, stripping out the name of a second owner. In the blank space where the co-owner's name had been, someone had written one word in careful, ink-heavy strokes. Gone. She flipped it over. On the back, in smaller handwriting, Eleanor had added, "If they come asking, you tell them we're still here. Even if I'm not." Mara closed her eyes. The house creaked, settling. Wind brushed along the eaves like someone running their hands over the roof, checking for softness. Whatever this was, it went deeper than a few old letters. There was history layered into these boards, into the well, into the fields that now lay fallow. People had tried to buy it, to carve it, to fold it into some larger plan and move on. Eleanor, apparently, had not let them. Now it was Mara's name on the deed, and this hidden pocket of paper burned against the quiet like a small, stubborn flame. She tucked everything back into the tin except one map, a hand-drawn sketch of the property lines with something marked in the north field. A small X near a note that read, "Spring House. Original." The modern survey map from the lawyer hadn't shown anything out there except scrub. "What's a spring house?" Nora's voice floated from the doorway, sleepy and soft. She rubbed her eyes with one fist. "You're supposed to be asleep," Mara said gently. "So are you," Nora replied, then stepped closer, peering at the map. "What's that X?" "Something old," Mara said, "and something your great-grandmother didn't want anyone forgetting." Nora traced the little mark with her fingertip. Outside, the wind shifted. The farmhouse held its breath. Somewhere under the field, under the years, under all the arguments about what the land was worth, something waited. Mara looked at her daughter, at the tired room, at the open frame on the wall. They were not running this time. They were already inside. "Tomorrow," she said, "we'll go see what the house wants us to find." Mara woke before the cabin knew she was awake, lying still beneath the quilt her grandmother had sewn back, when life had a steadier rhythm. And winters didn't sound like arguments between wind and wood. Dawn hadn't climbed the ridge yet, but she sensed it gathering behind the firs, waiting for permission to arrive. Lily slept curled against her side, fingers knotted in her mother's sleeve the way she used to as a toddler, as if her small hand remembered long before her mind did. The cabin breathed around them, soft creaks, low sighs, like an animal thawing out after too many cold years. Mara whispered, "Today we figure out what she was trying to tell us," though she wasn't even sure who the she was anymore, her grandmother, the town, or the house itself. By the time Mara stepped outside with her boots half laced, the frost had turned the yard to broken glass. She crunched toward the root cellar door where they'd found the journal the night before. It sat now on the porch table beside the lantern, its cracked leather binding tinted gold by the early light. She flipped through the pages again, names, dates, half-legible sketches of the valley, and then the strange entry from 1894. "If anything happens, the stone hides what I could not bear to lose. The mountain keeps its promises better than people." She traced the sentence with a fingertip, feeling the pressure of time itself. Her grandmother had marked that line decades later with a penciled star. It wasn't an accidental inheritance. It was a message across generations. Lily came out yawning, hair wild with sleep. "Mom, you're reading again." Mara nodded without looking up. "This journal, it's not just memories, it's instructions." Lily climbed onto the bench beside her, pulling the quilt around both their shoulders like a shared oath. "Do you think Grandma wanted us to find it?" Mara considered. "I think she wanted someone to care enough to try." Lily leaned against her cheek and whispered, "Then we're the right people." The valley spread out below them. Silent snowfields, thin smoke rising from faraway chimneys. The river winding like a thought hesitant to be spoken. Somewhere in that quiet, the truth waited. They couldn't explore until the sun lifted the cold from the ground, so they spent the morning making the cabin more livable. Lily swept dust into disciplined piles, while Mara patched the worst window with plastic and tape stolen from the shed. They discovered a pantry drawer full of stained recipe cards that smelled faintly of cinnamon and old winters. They found a stack of letters her grandmother had never mailed, some with open anger, others thick with apologies that had nowhere to land. She was lonely, Lily said softly, sorting the envelopes by age. Maybe the house was the only place she trusted. Mara pressed her lips together, overwhelmed by how much she'd misunderstood the silence her grandmother wrapped around herself like armor. Around noon, they headed toward the old spring at the base of the ridge, the place mentioned repeatedly in the journal. The path wound between pines that leaned like elders listening. Every so often, Mara would stop and compare the landscape with the sketches drawn more than a century ago. The same boulder, the same twisted cedar, the same dip in the earth, where the frost formed its own language. It was as though the mountain remembered better than the people who lived on it. When they reached the spring, Lily crouched and touched the water. "It's warm," she said, amazed. Mara felt it too, the strange mildness that didn't match the season. Geothermal pocket, maybe, she guessed, but the tone of her voice betrayed her uncertainty. Behind the spring was a formation of shale that looked like an accidental doorway, narrow, slanted, layered like pages of a book turned sideways. Mara brushed loose snow from the rock until she found the faint carving, the same symbol repeated in the journal, a circle split by a downward line. "Grandma traced this," Lily whispered. Mara felt something shift inside her, a recognition, a memory, a possibility. She hooked her nails beneath the top layer of shale and pushed. It moved more easily than she expected, as though someone had reinforced the hinge long ago. Layer by layer, the stone folded outward until an opening appeared, small enough to force them through sideways, large enough that someone had once intended it to be used. The air inside was cold, but not unpleasant, stale, but not suffocating. Their lantern light skimmed the narrow corridor until it opened into a chamber just big enough for two people to stand back to back. At the center sat a wooden chest, darkened by age yet perfectly intact, as though time had circled around it politely. Lily squeezed Mara's wrist. "Mom, what is it?" Mara lifted the lid. The hinges groaned in protest. Inside were 3 bundles wrapped in linen. She unwrapped the first, letters tied with twine, each envelope bearing dates from the late 1800s. The second bundle contained sketches, detailed maps of the valley, annotations in a woman's steady hand, soil composition, water lines, mineral veins. Mara felt her heart speed up. She understood. "These are land survey maps," she murmured. "Accurate ones. This valley, the whole mountain. It's full of resources." The third bundle was heavier. Inside lay a canister sealed with wax, stamped with the insignia of the U.S. Geological Survey from 1896. Mara broke the seal. A metal cylinder slid out, engraved with coordinates matching the property line. Inside it was a parchment stamped confidential, edges crisp despite the century. The document detailed mineral reserves, specifically rare earth elements worth millions in today's market. "Oh my God," Mara whispered. "Grandma knew." Lily blinked. "What does it mean?" Mara closed the chest, breath trembling. "It means the town leaders knew too, and someone hid this so it wouldn't be exploited. This isn't just a family secret. This is a town-changing secret." They carried the chest back to the cabin, each step heavy with the weight of history and possibility. The sunlight waned as they reached the porch, painting the valley in muted silver. Inside, Mara spread the documents across the kitchen table. Lily sat cross-legged, carefully flattening pages with the reverence of a librarian. Mara paced. "If this gets out, the town will change. People will fight over land, over rights, over money. Your grandmother didn't want that. She hid it for a reason." Lily lifted the parchment. "But why leave clues? Why want us to find it?" Mara stopped pacing. Maybe she trusted us to decide how the truth should live. That night, the storm moved in from the west, shaking the cabin like a reminder. Wind slapped the shutters. Snow whirled into ghost shapes along the eaves. Mara stoked the fire, while Lily read aloud pieces of the journal. "Listen," Lily said. "If someone I love finds this, let them protect the mountain, not the money." Mara lowered her head. She wanted a guardian, not a miner. Lily folded the journal shut. "So what do we do?" Mara leaned against the wall, feeling the cabin's heartbeat sync with hers. "We keep the secret safe, but not buried. We find a way to use it for the town's good. Carefully. Quietly. Like she did." When the storm settled after midnight, someone knocked on the door. 3 slow knocks. Then, silence. Mara froze. Lily grabbed the quilt and wrapped it around herself. Mara approached the door cautiously and opened it just a crack. A man in a heavy coat stood on the porch, snow clinging to his shoulders. It was Sheriff Colton Hayes, the only person in town who'd ever looked at Mara without pity. He removed his hat. "Your chimney's smoking," he said quietly. "Saw it from the ridge. Just checking you two are all right." Mara exhaled. "We're fine." Hayes hesitated. "Town's been talking. Folks weren't expecting you to come back. Some think the property should have reverted to the historical society." His gaze flicked to the documents on the table. "You find something?" Mara closed the door further, blocking his view. "Just family things." Hayes nodded, understanding more than she said. "If anyone bothers you, you let me know." As he stepped away, he added, "Your grandmother always said that mountain chooses who it tells its stories to. Didn't believe her then. Might believe her now." Mara locked the door and turned back toward Lily, whose face brimmed with silent questions. "He didn't see," Mara assured her. But inside, she knew they were on borrowed time. Secrets had their own weather systems. Morning broke clear and brittle. The storm had sealed the world in white. Mara brewed weak coffee while Lily toasted bread over the fire. They packed the documents into a tin box lined with old cloth, sealing it with twine. "Where will we hide it now?" Lily asked. Mara looked around the cabin, the sagging beams, the stubborn windows, the floorboards worn smooth by generations. somewhere only we can reach. She retrieved her grandmother's old sewing table, lifted the false bottom they'd discovered the day before, and tucked the tin box inside. For now, it stays here. They spent the noon hours repairing the barn roof, brushing snow from the chicken coop left empty for years, stacking firewood like a promise. As they worked, Mara felt something soften inside her, a sense of belonging she hadn't known she was starving for. Every strike of the hammer, every sweep of the broom, every breath in the mountain air made her feel less like a visitor and more like an heir to something she hadn't realized was hers to inherit. Lily hummed as she worked, a small melody echoing through the hollow places of the land. In the afternoon, Hayes returned, this time with a cardboard box. "Your grandmother's things," he said. "We kept them at the station till someone claimed the property." Mara thanked him and carried the box inside. Lily helped her unpack photographs, recipe notebooks, seed packets, and at the bottom, a sealed letter addressed to Mara. The ink was faded, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Her grandmother's steady script read, "When the mountain speaks to you, listen gently. And when it refuses to answer, protect what it entrusted you with. Not everyone should hold a map to power." Mara's throat tightened. Lily squeezed her hand. "She knew you'd come back someday," Lily whispered. Snow began to fall again as evening rolled in, soft flakes drifting like ash from a quieter world. Mara lit a lantern and sat at the table with Lily, sorting through the photographs. One showed her grandmother as a young woman standing beside the very spring where they'd found the chamber. Another showed town leaders gathered around surveying equipment, smiling stiffly at the camera. On the back of that one, a single sentence was written: "Not everything valuable should be owned." Mara flipped the photograph face down. "She wasn't just protecting the mountain," she murmured. "She was protecting the town from itself." Later, as they prepared for bed, Lily crawled into the quilt and asked, "Are we safe here?" Mara hesitated, then brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's forehead. "Yes," she said, "because we're not alone anymore." Lily nodded sleepily. "Grandma's watching, right?" Mara kissed her head. "In all the ways that matter." When Lily finally drifted into sleep, Mara stepped outside onto the porch. The snow had quieted. The sky stretched dark and endless above the ridge, stars flickering like distant lanterns. The mountain loomed steady and ancient, holding its secrets the way a parent holds the hand of a child crossing a busy road, firm, protective, silent. She whispered into the cold air, "I'll guard it. The way you wanted." The wind drifted through the pines in a slow sigh, almost like acknowledgement. For the first time in months, Mara didn't feel afraid of tomorrow. She felt responsible for it. Her grandmother hadn't just left her a house. She had left her a burden, a gift, a duty. And Mara Reed, homeless yesterday, caretaker today, finally felt strong enough to carry it.